The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting group. Access Fort Wayne is a department of the Allen County Public Library. If you or anyone you know might be interested in making a television show, please call 260-421-1250.
Hi, welcome to the Cashman Mind, Body, Spirit Show. This is going to be a very interesting subject today, and I beg you to be a little bit open-minded. I'm not giving any hard-nosed opinions. I'm just sort of telling the story the way it is about illnesses and injuries and even deaths that have occurred to children. And it really goes back way in history. And now we're hearing about the guns all the time, and the Senate and House is meeting about changing the law and all that, and I beg them to be open-minded about it. I'm not against owning a gun, but I do think we definitely need to change how we regulate them, like maybe change the age, maybe to not have machine guns and 18-year-old mentally impaired children. I mean, it's complex. I don't have the final answer, but I pray that they do pass something which will save lives. Let's face it, 12 kids die a day from gun violence, and actually, if you include adults, it's 100 a day. And they'll also be affected by these laws. So it's important. And then 36 are injured. They're living in wheelchairs, they're paralyzed, they're blind. So this is a serious problem. It is the number one cause of death among children up to age 18. Mm-hmm. So let's be open-minded about it. But today, I'm going to review, though, a book I wrote a number of years ago, which does include actually a chapter on guns, but there are more things in guns that are killing children. And we see if we can't avoid some of the things that are doing that, which are occurring every day. So I wrote a book called Harming and Killing Our Children. It's kind of, let's face it, kind of a brutal name, but again, I wanted it, and you can get in the library or get on Amazon, probably $5 or something. I'm not here selling books, but I reread it again for the probably 5th or 10th time. But it summarized the subject, I think, quite well, and I'm going to review some of that with you today. What are other things besides children, besides guns, that harm children? Is something as simple as the milk they're drinking. Yeah. Let me review that with you a little bit. I'm going to go, there's about 15 things, but maybe we'll get through about 10 of those. But milk is something that parents are pushing at the children. And myself, when I grew up as a child in Germany, we drank cow's milk all the time, but it was fresh milk, probably not as harmful. Then I moved to New York City. My dad had a deli, and they gave me milk all the time. And I noticed I had all kind of rashes and acne on my lips, and girls went and gave me a kiss. Yes, that's true. And people would remark on the things I had all over the place. When I stopped drinking milk, that went away. So the problem with milk is we have about 5,400 mammals, different animals, and the milk of every animal is different than the other. Say more carbohydrates or more protein or more fat. Yes, it is different. Every animal, veterinarians would tell you if you give the milk of one animal to another animal, there's a good chance it would die from an anaphylactic allergic reaction. That is true. But we are drinking the milk of a cow, and another animal who has different proteins, different carbohydrates, different fats. It has growth hormone in it, and as a matter of fact, once a calf is born, it is immediately injected by growth hormone. Why is that? To make it grow more rapidly so it can increase its milk production and industry can make more money. But your child or you who drink the milk will be taking in the growth hormone too, and it has effects in your body. Yes, and then they put the cow in a cage and they use pesticides and herbicides so they can't move or exercise, and they put hormones on it. And when you give the milk to your child, the child is taking in all these chemicals and all these hormones, and you can see that can result in illnesses. Yes, there is a company that we all know about from Indianapolis who manufactured this growth hormone. They were so ashamed of it that we were giving it to the newborn calf immediately to make it grow more because it affects on the person drinking the milk, that they had a subdivision. They called it by a different name. And then they even sold the company. They were so ashamed of it. Because it was harming a lot of children. So let me review this in more detail. I tell you, incidentally, there's a very good book you could read, get it from the library or Amazon, and that's by Joe Keon. By Joe Keon. This book right here called Whitewash. Whitewash by Joe Keon. I highly encourage you to read this book because I don't want you to take just my word. Once you read that book with probably 1,000 scientific references, if you drink milk again, I would be surprised. I read that and I was done with milk. And interesting enough, I used to get, after eating cheese, for example, and some food with some milk product worked in, I get this 3 hours later, I get this abdominal attack. I couldn't decide whether I was having a heart attack or whether it was a bowel thing. And I cut out all milk products, all cheese products. I never had another attack again. And it's understandable because milk has in it lactose, okay? Lactose. But most of us, some of us, as we get older, we don't have the enzyme lactase that digests it, and then we have reactions to it. And nature designed it that way. Even in white people, most people, the enzyme goes away at about age 4. Asians, 90%, don't even have the enzyme. They don't drink any milk at all. Yeah. Black people, 50% are missing the enzyme, have a reaction to milk or milk products. And whites, maybe 25% don't have the enzyme. And remember what I said, starting at age 4, it tends to, then it goes away. So every milk product or cheeses that we might eat, for example, can have effects on us. Cheese derived from milk products has on it a little morphine-like substance in it too. So we can become, you won't believe this, we can become addicted to cheese. It's not a full dose of morphine, but just a touch. Casomorphone that has now been discovered. And I finally figured out the attacks I was having in my gut, which almost felt life-threatening. I think it was an allergic reaction, maybe anaphylactic reaction. I don't know what it was, but I stopped eating cheese products, and bingo, the attacks stopped. So be aware. Where I used to do yoga and work out, lifts and weights, the studio I used to go to for a long time. I remember my instructor explained to me how all the kids had constant ear infections. They were always having eczema, a rash, and ear infections all the darn time. And I was at the time reading a whitewash book, I think at the time, and I said, why don't you just cut out milk, see what happens? Her 3 kids, everything cleared up. Their rashes went away. Their ear infections all cleared up. So to know about milk, I think is a huge thing. And you're constantly told your child needs calcium from the milk. That's actually is not true. They can get calcium in other ways. The acne I was speaking about, there are about 40 million people who have problems with that. And you can imagine the effect it had to me as a child. And we consume about 60 pounds of cheese per person per year in this country. Just think of it. And people will gain weight from it. It has a lot of fats in it. It causes allergies. Cow's milk contains at least 30 proteins, which, if you can't properly digest them, you can have allergic reactions. You can develop cancer from them, allergies, skin rashes, ear infections, asthma, all affect ear drinkers. So isn't that interesting? So I think this is a very, very important. And as I mentioned, the sugar in milk is called lactose, but you need the enzyme to break it down. And this protein called casein in milk, and that can exert an allergic reaction to attack your pancreas and cause type 1 diabetes. Hardly anyone has explained that to the people. Yeah, milk is a cause of type 1 diabetes where the pancreas is wiped out and you need to be on insulin the rest of your life. Incidentally, the company that invented the growth hormone to inject the calf as it's born to make it a lot bigger so it yields more milk is also the same company that makes insulin. That's true. Interesting. Are those two connected? Don't you wonder? Since 2003, the National Dairy Council has spent $200 million on this Healthy Weight with Dairy campaign. It was all a lie, and it was proven so. It was a fraud. Was it a criminal act? Well, it's in the whitewash book. He thinks so, because it was harming and killing our children. Interesting. So pay attention. I know of plenty of children and adults. I don't drink milk. I don't miss it at all. Matter of fact, I feel a great deal better, and I don't have those cheese attacks anymore. So a glass of milk contains a variety of hormones and growth factors. As many as 59 of them. You know, I told you about that. It also is a risk factor for breast cancer. And I already mentioned that. So I think we have covered that. I think well or not. Let's talk about the next one that is hurting our children. Our children are going to pot. I'm speaking of marijuana. About 20% of the children are smoking marijuana. Mm-hmm. It's even higher in cigarette. I did not think that marijuana addiction rate was higher than cigarettes, but it is. It was well studied by a former Surgeon General of the United States, William J. Bennett, and he wrote a book called Going to Pot. I encourage you to read it because your kids may be smoking it and you don't know it. You don't, because marijuana and pot is spreading throughout the country. Some states have it legalized, others don't. In Indiana now, a lot of people have these little pharmacies and they're selling medicinal marijuana. To me, it's the road to regular use of marijuana. It's coming. Our state still hasn't improved it, but we're surrounded by states where marijuana now is legalized, and it'll spread through Indiana. Marijuana has great effects on the children's body, but especially the brain. And it's much more addictive in children than adults. And if a child smokes regularly starting at a young age, it can destroy part of the brain, and it will not return to normal again. And they have found that children, for example, if they were brilliant, they become average. If they become average, they become slow. Yeah, these are because of lack of brain development. And the age is not fully developed in infant till age 25. Yeah, so if you see your child withdrawing or acting different than he used to, think of marijuana. Look around and see whether it's hidden in his bedroom, for example. I think this is quite important. And about 9% of adults are addicted to cannabinoids. That's the marijuana. And about 17% of the children are addicted to it right now. Mm-hmm. And if they've been smoking it regularly before age 21, it probably is how their life will be spent. And most of them, they call it pot, will develop a pot belly. The brain will be smaller. They'll be slower in school. They may get involved in accidents. They're more likely to have sexual problems. Accidental pregnancies are not uncommon. They were smoking pot, and their hesitancy and consequences, they're no longer thinking of that. Before you know it, they're not married, and they have a child. That happens commonly to pot smokers. There are 700 chemicals in marijuana, actually, and they all have effects on the human body. Can you imagine the number, actually? And then many have brain damage, pot belly, and the brain damage is not reversible. So cannabinoids, marijuana impair motor coordination while driving, working at home, playing sports, and other activities. The chemical in there, THC, is the main active chemical in marijuana, although, like I said, there's about 700 of them. Alter judgment, increased risk of unprotected sexual behavior, more likely to transmit sexual diseases, unintended pregnancy. You can see, and I can go on and on. If people use it for a long time, especially children, it has a 90% addiction rate. Occasional use, about 25 to 50% addiction rate. And then also, remember to see if you can read Bennett's book. And marijuana actually has been used for thousands of years. It was used by the Indians, for example. Marijuana was being used in medicinal purposes because of its psychological effects. You light up, it affects your dopamine center, your serotonin center. I'm in heaven. At least you are for a little while until you need the next one. 33 chemicals of marijuana can cause cancer. Mm-hmm. So Joe Califano also, he also was head of public health, and he wrote a book called How to Raise a Drug-Free Child. So if your child is having problems, even with cigarettes or with marijuana or narcotics, read his book. I've read it a couple of times. I think a very good book to read, and How to Raise a Drug-Free Child, because we as parents, these things happen. We ourselves we may not be smoking, we may not be drinking alcohol, but our kid does. So we need to be informed about it and learn something about it. I think Sanjay Gupta on CNN even thought, keeps on giving anecdotal evidence that marijuana is okay, but I think he changed his mind. But that was on CNN, and that was a big mistake to mention something that publicly. And so let's talk about the next one again, harming our children. Remember what I said. Guns are number one. Our congressmen need to step up to bat. But we need to step up to bat too and vote the people in and out of office. So it's not, it's us parents and the government and our politicians and maybe a certain party that needs to step up to bat and change things, and they may. I hope I wake up Friday or Monday and they've passed a great law, but like I said, that's not the only thing that's harming our children. Many other things, and they need to also be attacked. Harming and killing our children with fast food. I mean, look at all these fast food centers, and then look around you. Like I walked through a big food market today, and parents are not paying attention. I saw a young, overweight boy, his cart, and his mother was encouraging to put down drinks with sugar in them and putting donuts and all sorts of things to make him sicker. You know, you can't get mad at her. She maybe doesn't know better. It appears to me she doesn't know better. The child doesn't know better. But what if the child, odds are the child goes to school? They are not teaching them in his school what proper nutrition is. Mm-hmm. They will even, in the schools, serve you milk. Yes. And if you try to substitute other type of milk, soy milk, for example, the government will stop its federal support of your school. Yes, that's true. I've seen that in our neighborhood clinic in town here. Well, almost everybody's diabetic, and they encourage the kids to drink milk. But I would say, when it's not healthy, what's going on? Industry is giving the politicians money, and they are encouraged the children to drink milk when it's not healthy. They encourage them to have processed food in the school. It's a little bit better, but I've tried to get in the food line at one of our schools, and they won't let you near it. Why is that? Because I might say, you know, the food that you're giving these kids is not good for them. So a lot of the foods kids are eating are fake foods. These fast food restaurants are all over the world. And we have to chuckle a little bit because, you know, we're all, this Ukraine war, we're all somewhat concerned about that. But one of the things the Russians did, they kicked out all the fast food companies that originated in America. And you know their names, including fast food drinks. So probably a lot of more people are going to live in Russia because they're no longer eating the food that's killing them. Fast food can be bought fast, consumed fast, enters your cells fast. It's been stripped of the nutrients and phytochemicals and vitamins that are good for you. It's mainly sugar. These are mainly sugar and full of bad fats to make you unhealthy. That's in 50% of the meals, some people, because they're working hard or they don't know better, are consuming this fast food, and this is making our population very unhealthy. So like I said, it's not just bullets that are killing our kids. It's fast food too. It's marijuana too. It's milk. There are other things. And I tell you, a very important thing, excuse me while I drink a little water. Maybe my voice can pick up a little bit. Remember, half our body is water. So it's good to consume some now, especially since this morning I played 2 hours of pickleball and I could be dehydrated a little bit. Let's speak a little bit about something that's very interesting. Epigenetics upon your genes. It's a new field that is developed, and in some ways it's good, in some ways it's bad. And parents, especially mothers, should pay attention to it. After fertilization, okay? Now, when in the uterus, only 5% or so, maybe a little less, of the genetic script that will determine the development of the body, the brains, the organs of that child in the uterus and the life that lives after it's born. Only 5% of its genetic script has been written. So the end of our genes, which is the DNA, decides what we're going to look like, but the RNA expresses it, okay? And it's a long script. Of course, they're micro nano size. And so what, in that genetic script, because the blood of the mother and infant are connected. So what the mother is eating, consuming, drinking, sounds she produces, whether she's playing music or not, the infant script will be written by what the mother is eating and drinking. If she's smoking, using narcotics, using alcohol, type of food she's eating, will write the genetic script of the infant. Is that news to you? It's kind of important. It's kind of important. And a lot of mothers are smoking away or taking narcotics or drinking alcohol. Alcohol has one of the biggest effects on the development of the infant, especially the brains. And we'll speak more about that. So epigenetics, an up-and-coming field, extremely important. And it's a lot of my books or website. You can read more about it. When the child is in the womb, you are writing the genetic script of the infant. Let me tell you something else. About 50% or more of the people now, when they're ready to have the baby, have C-sections. That's maybe nice, maybe easier on the mother without having to go through labor, but the infant then never passed through the vaginal canal, which would have painted the infant's child with the bacteria of the mother and viruses of the mother, and then it would start off and develop the gut of the child. The child's gut is not fully developed till age 3, but it starts by passing through the vagina. If you have a C-section, that child never passed through the vagina. So before you have a C-section, think about it and read about it a little bit. The doctor's not going to tell you because they get paid a lot more to do a C-section, okay? A midwife can deliver a baby, okay? So kind of study that a little bit, because the biome, your biome decides the health of your child. Our biome, our bacteria that live in our gut, we have in our gut trillions of bacteria. Those living guys are in there right now, yes. And in a C-section, you did not inject your gut bacteria into your child. Mm-hmm. The child will develop the bacteria through the foods and drinks you're giving them, and that you touch them, but it will not be as good as if you're a healthy person to begin with. You didn't paint the face with your bacteria as your child is being born. C-sections has side effects, and some of which are not good. So I think you need to study that. And we are what our biome is. That's who we are. That determines our illnesses. What kind of, whether we have Firmicutes or Bacteroides, bacteria in our gut help determine our health. And let's go on to a little bit of the mothers consuming alcohol, for example. And alcohol is very destructive to intrauterine development. It affects the neurotransmitters between the nerves. We have 100 billion nerves in our brain, but we have 100 trillion neurotransmitters. They connect the axon and the dendrite, okay? They jump across. They're very small. We have trillions of them, but when they are consuming alcohol, that can destroy them, hurt them. Children can be born. It can affect the genes with the deformed faces. One part of the face develop and not the other. Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah, and so it's critical. I know I play pickleball with a man that's very good, and I noticed they have a child who plays pickleball too, but is very deformed facially. You wonder, is that from alcohol? I don't know. I never had the guts to ask them. But that's what they're speaking about. Children born of people who are consuming a lot of alcohol, their heads will be smaller. Mm-hmm. The heads, the facial deformities. They have all types of illnesses and can be paralyzed or be slow in school, never be aggressive, be paranoid. Alcohol has tremendous effects on fetal development, and it's very important that, especially after conception, no alcohol. It can destroy your infant, and you, the mother, father, maybe both of you doing, are responsible. If that child is deformed, every time you look at your child and hug your child, you are responsible. Maybe you can stand for that, but I would think that would not be a good feeling. That, you know, and the child will live their life like that, and it's so you need to pay attention to that. So. Non-alcoholic SD is about 4 or 5 different syndromes, very common. I've noticed, and my wife keeps reminding me that women seem to be drinking more alcohol than men these days. Maybe they're more stressed. The men are being more stressful on them, or their emotions are different. They may interpret life differently, let's face it. They do, and some of us say, thank God they do, because they don't tend to start wars. They don't tend to, like guns in the home, you know, we spoke about earlier, which is something I may speak about at this point. If there are guns in the home, remember I said I'm not against owning a gun. If there are guns in the home, the most likely person to die from that gun is not an intruder. It's somebody in your home 4 times as likely, has been statistically proven. 60% of the deaths from a gun in the home are suicides. Men, not uncommonly, and they are successful 90% of the time. If a woman commits suicide, it's only successful 10% of the time because they use drugs and they can be rescued. So the most likely person is not a intruder, but we all live in different situations. Some people have just absolutely got to have a gun in the home, but there are other things too, you know, tasers, pepper sprays, things like that. You're more likely to hit the person because it's a bigger field, but I'm not picking what you should use. And if you have a gun in the home, you have to store them properly. I can go right down the list. Store them properly. Don't have them just laying around. They can have a bullet in them. If you read this book that I have here for you, I list them like 1 through 10. I don't have time to go through all of that. And it's not determined by your intelligence necessarily. I remember a neurosurgical partner I had, and one of the neurologists, and they were in the house, and they'd been out shooting, and they were cleaning the guns. I don't know what they were doing, but all of a sudden, the living room window disappeared. No one was killed, but here's 2 super specialists, highly skilled, great-hearted individuals. I love them both, but not practicing gun safety. Kind of interesting, okay? So alcohol control, not using it, especially considering the effects. As a neurosurgeon, I treated a lot of people with alcohol problems, and I couldn't believe it. I saw some people who came in, you know, they had formed a blood clot in their brain from long-term alcohol use. But what happens when the alcohol destroys the brain, it slowly recedes and may not cause huge problems right away. I had some people where I did a CT scan where 1/3 of the brain was missing. Mm-hmm. The fortunate thing is, for most people, if they stop drinking, the body repairs itself. But you can tell in the people that have been doing it 20, 30, 40, 50 years, their brain is disappearing a little bit at a time to the point they may not die, but they have to live the last 20, 30 years in a nursing home or a rehab center. So I think this is very important. Let's talk about cigarettes for a minute. Maybe 15, 17% of the people are addicted to cigarettes, and they can be very addictive. If the parents are smoking, the child could be breathing it in through them itself or as a fetus through the mother. The nicotine affects every cell in the body. Mm-hmm. The child's in the uterus, you're writing the genetic script with nicotine. Yes. And people with higher rates of cancer. Higher rates of cancer, I mean, usually you hear about the lung because they're breathing it in. But actually, it's high rates of cancer in every organ in the body. It can occur in the skin, the kidney, the pancreas, the stomach. It can occur in any organ. Increased rates of cancer if you smoke cigarettes, and it can cause trouble problems. I don't know if you knew it or not, but it's kind of interesting because it also relates to e-cigarettes. Cigarettes have in them sugar. Why is that? In 1910, the cigarette companies figured out they could only addict less than 20% of the people to cigarettes. They wanted a higher addiction rate because they addicted people by the cigarettes. Remember, they light up. What's the next one? Light up. That's the life of a smoker. No, okay. And they found out if they could add sugar to the nicotine, the addiction rate doubled. Hardly anybody, I rarely speak to anybody that knows that. Mm-hmm. And how they do it is the tobacco leaf, they have to cure it, for a while, and it's upside down for about a week or so. And you know what they do then? They soak it in molasses for a couple of days, increase the sugar content of the sugar leaf, then it's in your cigarettes. Sugar makes your air in your lungs acidic instead of alkaline, and the acidity opens the alveoli further and the nicotine jumps into the blood. That's how it's done, and you know something I found out, and I never heard anybody ever knew that or said anything about it. It's also in e-cigarettes. I think we want the kids to smoke. It's totally ridiculous. Don't let your kids smoke e-cigarettes. And it can be so destructive. I remember my cousin in Boston wanted me to see their neighbor, which was a German couple like me, a lovely couple, about walking the house. Man, it was stinking of secondary smoke. Secondary smoke alone can have the same effects on you. Beautiful people. I love talking to them. They were close to a town I had lived in Germany, and then they called me up 2 years later to tell me they're both dead. Not a good thing. And if you're smoking, especially, we're talking about children today, you can kill your child. You can change the genetic structure and genes of your child and cause them to have childhood leukemias and illnesses as children because you smoked. Yeah, you can do that. Another syndrome is non-alcoholic NACS narcotics, okay? Where a mother is using narcotics regularly. And remember, her bloodstream is connected to the child's bloodstream. And when the child is born, it can be underweight, overweight, it can have difficulty breathing, it can be spastic, it can be deformed, it can be paralyzed. A normal child may be in the hospital 1 or 2 days. With one of these, maybe in there for months, and you get the bill. No less the effects you have in your child. The effects on the child may be for a lifetime. Maybe for a lifetime that you caused paralysis, retardation, increased rates of cancer in the child. You did it because you're using narcs. So it's some people are addicted. So it's very important if you are addicted and you're taking narcotics, or maybe you're taking narcotics even with a prescription from your doctor, it still has effects on the infant. So you got to see if you might avoid getting pregnant. Remember, you're not thinking right when you're on a narc, and you may not be using contraception and have a child, and you decide to have it, and now you have a retarded child. Next, next I'd like to talk a little bit is the undeclared war against children when we go back in history, okay? I summarize it really well in my book, that we've had a war against children going back thousands of years. I'm not going to review this whole few pages for you, because I'm not sure that you could stand it. I could barely not read it. Let me give you a few examples, though, so that we know. There was a government statute in 1562 that regulated control over provinces confining children to indentured servitude for 7 years. We made slaves out of our little 6 years old. They were indentured servants for 7 years. In other words, they had to give you service for free for 7 years. A system of enslavement that lasted until 1815. In the 17th century, 6-year-old children toiled in the clothing industry, and a great demand burst forth for children in factories under the Industrial Revolution. We did that to children. And that we now letting someone invade the school and just kill them with machine guns while the police stand by. Something's going to change here. I'll tell you one thing, though. The government, state and federal, has passed very strict laws. And mothers have to be aware of this, that if a child is abused in your home, and say a relative or neighbor reports that, or social worker, police find out about it, and they investigate it. I saw it a number of times in the hospital because, I was a neurosurgeon. Let me just have a little more water here. And I saw it. Police walked in, mother standing there, a child in the crib. The police took the child and left with the child. That's the last time that mother saw the child. She might have gone through the courts, eventually had visitation, but now it's living in a foster home or an institution or whatever, because someone reported her. Maybe that was the third time it happened. The child was now battered. We have such a thing called battered child syndrome. They have studied children in detail, and most of these injuries occur age 1 or under. I used to treat kids with blood clots in their head, and then we x-rayed their legs, and their legs would either be spastic or there'd be broken bones, and that was called a battered child. They studied that and proved it. Yeah, and the child, of course, was taken from the parents. That's a known entity. A known entity that still, of course, occurs today. So I think if you as a neighbor or a friend or a relative see mom or dad abusing their children, you got to report it. Matter of fact, it's illegal not to report it. So what I'm saying, and that the many things that injure children. And let's review the history a little more. And in the 16th, 17th, 1800s, children were especially exploited for their labor. I'm talking about kids 6, 7, 8 years old, not high school age, okay? Child labor took root under the apprenticeship system through workhouses and orphanages as well as industry. In these places, cruel punishment was inflicted on the children until an outcry on the part of the community led to the idea of public health in John Frank, 1750-1821. The German physician, I'm originally German, okay, born in New York though, found the science of public health, was shocked by the agrarian child labor used in continental, which resulted in youngsters becoming deformed and misshapen because they were abused. So the abuse of children goes back many years. And like I said, our county, state, federal laws protect them a great deal to the point they can take away your child with the slightest sign of abuse. But we allow 18-year-olds to buy guns and machine guns and they can enter the schools and machine gun them to death while the police is standing by. Something isn't right here. We're constantly adjusting things, and I hope Congress steps up to bat and changes the laws. England was having this similar problems, and they stepped up to bat and changed the law a great deal. So now their injury and death rates to children and adults from guns is extremely low. Australia was having the same problem, so they had somebody get a hold of a gun and killed a bunch of people, although they had a fairly low rate before that. And what can you do? You know what they did? In this country, we own 400 million guns are owned by 36% of the people, okay? In Australia, they bought 60% of them back. They offered money and bought people's weapons back, and that it reduced, of course, it was low to begin with, but reduced it even lower. So the number of guns make a difference. It's different, in all the nation. All I'm doing is saying that we might address the problem, and you have to gain some knowledge, I think, to read this book here a little bit and to learn about what other things can harm children. And as a parent, myself, you're a parent, no one gives you lessons. We need lessons. I think good parenting probably needs to be taught in the school system, as well as proper eating. Unfortunately, industry controls the food they serve in the school system, a little bit controlled by us, but not really. So a lot of times you have fast food cafeterias. Let's face it, something isn't right when you look around, and I can walk through a supermarket or go to a movie or sit on a park bench and watch the people walk by, probably 70, 80% unhealthy, and especially children. Type 2 diabetes, which is 30, 40 diseases, which cut off about 20 years of your life and give you 20 years of disability. It's 40 years we're talking about. The kids that I'm seeing that are unhealthy. So proper blood testing to me is important. I'm amazed that the Pediatric Society has not stepped up to bat at this time. That would have been of value, because they have stepped up to bat for some of these other laws I've spoken about. But right now, we're having mass shootings with guns of children in schools. And I think we need to hear from the pediatricians, who need to maybe address the thing like I am addressing too. The guns, they need to address the other things I spoke about, because they're harming the kids. And with that, the parents would change. I think we love our children, okay? But although I will admit, every morning I get up at 5 o'clock to read my books, and when it gets light, 6:30, I see all these animals eating out of my bird feeders. From you got it, man. I get woodchucks, I get deer, I get birds, there are rabbits, there are little ducks, and everything's flying around. I don't see them abusing their children, though, okay? And I have a woodchuck living under my house. I couldn't kill a mouse, okay? And 22 years, Woody has lived there, and he shows me his teeth. He's smiling at me because I feed him corn every day. But they hug each other. They love each other. The mother protects the baby geese, the baby ducks. What are we doing? Killing our kids. Come on. And it's not just guns. It's alcohol. It's narcotics. It's cigarettes. It's fast food. And some of us eat fast food because we're working two shifts. But again, teach your child to cook. That's a big one. And Mark Hyman, who writes a lot of good books on nutrition, I mean, great books, it's great to read. They wait for him to come home in the evening, and he cooks with the family. He helps pick the food. He helps doing the cooking, and then he consumes it with the family that are all together. And this is a wonderful thing. It's a good example. When I worked in neurosurgery, I get busy to a certain point. I should come home and always eat dinner with the family. But then I got busy and I stopped doing it. That was a big mistake. Because this togetherness, speaking to each other, looking at the food that you're eating, to have meals together as a family, teaching children to cook would be a wonderful thing to do. This book, which I wrote, also has in it, I personally think is worth, it's in my other half of the book. Years ago, I wrote a book called The Call of Life. Call of Life. See, I was seeing these problems in my patients, so and that is the reason I write about it. Here, Call of Life. You can get it on Amazon, and I have in there the 20 prescriptions that'll lead to a good life, and I can't go through all of these, but it's worth so to teach yourself, but also your children, good habits. I have some families who've taken these 20 prescriptions and post them on their refrigerator at home. They review them once a week. They make their kids memorize them. And you know what? They stop me in the street when I walk by and say, my kid is really a well-behaved kid. And I think the 20 prescriptions that you put together help do that. I mean, that makes me feel great. I wanted to post these in front of the courthouse in Fort Wayne, but the committee that runs the lawn, they refused. So right now, it is in front of the Criminal Justice Building for Children. There's a statue there. They're written on there. Let me just go through a couple. Treat others as you'd like to be treated. Be honest. Don't lie. Cheat or steal. Make your word your bond. Treat life with care. Avoid risky behavior. Practice showing respect for authority, parents, teachers, police, and government. Do not let mental or physical abuse go unnoticed. Report it to someone, because the next thing your child may be dead. Express honor, love, respect for your family. Make a commitment to continue education throughout your life. Show respect for all life, human and animal. Hey, that's me. I couldn't shoot an animal, for Pete's sake. What are you thinking? So there's 20 of these, but I'd like you to consider memorizing, or your kids memorize them, and you can find them on Wall Street in front of that building I spoke about, or they are in this book, the second half of this book, on harming, killing our children. This book right here, the other half of the book, and there's a chapter written on each prescription with stories. So I think you will find it very useful. So I tell you what the problems are, but also tell you what the solution is. And I hope you go out and vote, and I hope you tell your congressman to pass some useful laws regarding guns. But there are other things that harming and killing our children too. And I have discussed them with you, and I have a few others I didn't have time to talk about today. But I really appreciate you listening to me today. And you'll find this on YouTube and my other lectures. Go to YouTube, Rudy Cashman, Mind, Body, Spirit. I probably got 500 TV shows in there, all about health. I did this because I care about you. I love you. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.